Welcome to Lady Tech Africa, the podcast, and I am your host, Lerato Boikanyo, and this is the Future Forward series, which was created in celebration of the National Science Week. And this year's theme is set out by the South African Agency for Science and Technology Advancement is living in a high-tech world. Should we be worried? So through this series, we'll be discussing different topics that focus on this year's theme. And on today's episode, we have an amazing guest with us in studio today. And I'll be reading her bio because this lady, guys, I feel like she's lived a whole life. So we've got Sibahle Magadla in studio with us today. And Sibahle is a development economist, passionate about addressing poverty, inequality, and unemployment in Africa. Her major focus as an independent consultant is on providing technical support and advocacy to promote inclusive growth and sustainable development. She has over 10 years' experience in the private sector, academia, national government, donor organizations, supporting numerous projects in industrial policy, labor market policy, and the economics of competition and regulation. Not only is she skilled in research, data analysis, and writing, she also enjoys policy advocacy, training, and facilitation. And in July 2024, Sibahle moderated a panel session titled The Nexus of Women, Capital and Entrepreneurship in Africa at the Women Deliver Conference in Kigali, Rwanda. And in 2022, Sibahle was invited to speak at the United Nations Development Programme Annual Development Conference in Addis Ababa, discussing promoting women's employment outcomes and entrepreneurship in the Ethiopian economy. Sibahle is also a career and mindset coach, supporting graduates and young professionals to navigate their careers in the best way possible. Sibahle holds 2 master's degree qualifications in MSc Development Economics from the School of Oriental and African Studies from the University of London, which was funded by the Chevening Scholarship, and she also holds an MCom Economics from the University of Cape Town. Ma'am, this is the entire podcast.
That was a mouthful.
Like, you've done so many things already.
Thank you.
Like, I can't even understand how you already have like 2 master's degrees.
I won't lie. I love academia. I love studying. So even how the 2 master's degrees happened, I did them over 2 years. Like, it was 2 master's degrees over 2 years. I started a master's at UCT. I got news that the Chevening Scholarship was awarding me the scholarship.
Yeah.
So then I left the UCT master's halfway, went to the UK for a year to do the master's at SOAS University of London. Then I came back after I finished that one to finish what I left halfway at UCT. So all this happened over a period of 2 years.
Yeah,
I guess it's called acceleration. I don't know,
right?
but it was very,
It was like a marathon.
It really was.
master's degree.
Yeah, for sure. But no regrets. It was an amazing experience.
I can imagine. Wow, you have like an extensive portfolio, if I can put it that way. So when I was preparing for this, I thought about what questions I can ask you to just get into the conversation and to get to know you more.
Sure.
And, I thought about the dreaded question that I personally dread so much.
Yeah.
The question you get at interviews that says,
tell us about yourself.
I was like, these recruiters need to find a better way to
or phrasing or rewording. For sure.
So, but I came up with 3 questions that I'll be asking you that will kind of give us an idea of who we are speaking to today.
Sure.
And the first question is, if you could send a letter to someone in the future about your life, what key moments would you highlight?
Oh wow. This is a very beautifully phrased moments. Okay, so let me highlight 3, right? So highlights in my life. I think the first time I was kind of exposed to the ills of poverty and inequality. So when I was young, my mom every year used to make us declutter and get rid of things that we don't need and give them away. And I remember I had this toy telephone thing that if you like press different things, different people would respond. So anyway, the battery stopped working and I didn't value it. So I just said, whatever. So I remember we went to this place was called Etipini Mtata to like give the stuff away. And I remember and these are, homeless. They don't have, people, they don't have a lot of things. And I remember a little girl took that phone and she treasured it so much. Like she was playing with it like it was the best thing in the world. So that for me made me realize that like as young as I was, it was clear that inequality exists and we need to do something about it because it's not normal that there are people who are at the lower rungs of society when there's so much abundance, particularly in Africa.
Yeah,
it just doesn't make sense. So that's one memory that I'll always like keep in my mind.
Yeah.
The second memory is just my upbringing, being raised by a father who was a feminist. My dad really cared about, we were 5 girls. So my dad had 5 girls. And he really cared about our upward economic mobility. He pushed us to study, to read.
And the third question in a get to know me segment, I guess, is if your journey was a series of postcards, what moments would you capture to show how you got to where you are today?
I love that. So I saw it even growing up. Like I said, the support from my parents and sisters to just keep going. I can definitely say even in high school. So one of my English teacher in matric, Mrs. Isa, was a Kenyan lady.
Yeah.
So she made me exposed me to Pan-African thought, right? I mean, and she used to use Kiswahili words like, haraka haraka haina baraka, hurry there's no wisdom or glory in hurrying. You need to actually see things through.
Yeah.
So that exposed me to new ways of thinking as well. And then even my time at UCT, I was quite lucky when I was at UCT that I had almost male professors encourage me to keep going. So I think of Professor Harun Borat. I think, Professor Marie Lebrand. I think of, Professor Martin Wittenberg, may his soul rest in peace, who really said, you're actually good at the, econometrics. You're really good at like the statistical aspects of economics. Push harder, keep going. In instance where I was just like, I'm tired of doing this coding stuff on Stata. I actually don't want to do this. But they were like, you're doing well. So that's also a postcard getting, that encouragement, even from male. And I think there's something to be said about as a woman, having male support and encouragement in the work that you do to keep going. And then another one definitely that I'd put down there is my graduation ceremony. It's my first graduation undergrad at UCT. That felt like such a victory. Was really amazing. And I think the final one, I would say, how would I capture it in a postcard? But I think the life that I'm living now as an independent economics consultant, the freedom I have to travel and speak at various panels and conferences across the world, to share these insights in a manner that people from different disciplines, i.e. private sector and government, can understand, engage with, and do something about, is for me like a key milestone that I'd want captured in photo format. If that was possible.
Wow. Just taking away from what you're saying now, I think the consistent thread throughout your life is just the support,
for sure,
and the reaffirmation, I guess, of what you have to give to the world, or the qualities that you have that you may or may have not realized that you have them.
100%.
It's such an amazing thing to have. Not everyone is privileged to that.
You see.
And you recognize that you've had, those things that have influenced who you are today. So thank you for answering those questions so beautifully. And just to get into our topic today, so as said earlier, that this series was created by being inspired by the National Science Week, and with this year's theme being one of the, I think, most important discussions that we should be having, that we are living in a high-tech world. Should we be concerned? And those are valid thoughts, I guess, that we should be thinking about, and how technology is just influencing, the world today as we see it. But before we get into today's topic, when we spoke, a couple of weeks ago, I said to you, I don't personally know an economist. And when I think about an economist, what comes to my mind is the guy on the news that tells us about the interest rates, the basis points, or helps us understand the budget speech. But the kind of economics that you are doing, I had never heard of it before. So I'm just keen to know, how did you get to this? Because I'm even thinking about myself, as a high school student, trying to process and think of things that you want to pursue as a career. Economics would have never even crossed my mind. So how did you get to that?
Land here, which is a very valid question. And it's so interesting. Was it 2 weeks ago? I delivered a keynote at ABSA on the economics of Africa. There was a One Young World send-off event, and most people were there not economists, and I had to kind of contextualize economics in a manner that is relevant for their various parts. And I remember the main feedback that I got is that we actually don't really understand what economists do. So thank you for laying out the landscape in a manner that we could grasp it. So for me, I actually in high school was more of I did physics, biology. I was more in the sciences, mathematics. I excelled at that. And when I initially registered at UCT, I started with actuarial science because I was passionate about, in the future, creating the kind of insurance products that even people from low income households could get. This is also known as micro insurance. Okay. So when I was in my first year, I realized I don't like this thing. Economics was one of my electives. And I excelled at it. And basically back then we were being taught about how do you maximize resources under scarcity, right? So this could be financial resources, this could be food resources. What are the kind of principles can you use to do that? So that drew me, right? Because I'd already come from this background of feeling like inequality is an issue and it's a problem, right? But overall, what economists are usually care about is economic growth. So how do we make sure that as a nation, right, we are producing the kind of goods, right, that will lead to, say, people, yes, consuming those goods, but perhaps we're even able to export them so we can actually gain more resources and abundance as a consequence of those things. So when you see news news people saying, oh, the interest rates are going up, it's actually consequential for economic growth and development. So those indicators are part of the entire story of trying to not only maximize resources under scarcity, but actually maybe create more resources through exporting or creating a more dynamic, productive market in the economy. So that's why you'll hear all these terms. They actually link to more basic things. But the kind of economist I am, right, is, yes, I deal with issues of economic growth, but I ask questions such as, is it inclusive? So if the manufacturing sector is growing, right, if the ICT sector is growing, are we actually having more people being employed in that sector? Is it translating to higher employment rates? Is it translating to job creation? Can people afford, the basic food basket, right? Are basic goods, being delivered? Likewise, do we have the kind of education systems that link to these sectors which are growing? Are we training the next generation of youth to actually be absorbed into these financial services sectors, digital sectors that are becoming more prominent in a globalized economy where we are importing and exporting these various goods? So development economics cares more about, is it inclusive? Does it lead to development? Or is it only the people at the top who keep getting richer and wealthier from the said economic growth that's being driven?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. Now I feel like I want to go and and do that. But I think that background ties in beautifully with what we'll be talking about today, which is understanding, local and worldwide societal dependencies on technology.
You also find now you have new ways. So in the farming space, what's happening is that a lot of farmers in Africa are just like, they just own plots. So they grow their, their produce just for themselves. It's not for commercial. So it's a means of survival. But now with climate change, you'd find that they're struggling even there. So now you're starting to have apps that are where people can actually, very basic, using USSD technology, where they can provide data and notify and say, okay, I can't grow this as a result of climate change. And there's a response. Either there's kind of food being delivered, or they're getting more, I guess, different kinds of seeds that are more climate resilient because of that. Likewise, with the availability of drones, right? That's how like medications have been delivered to the most remote parts of the continent, because there's a drone that can now reach where a car or a truck wouldn't even manage, because there's just no there's no road for the car or the help to reach. So you found technology even in terms of like promoting humanitarian efforts, basic delivery of, medical supplies, food where necessary. Technology has played a very, very important role there. But I think more importantly, what technology has done is that it's given someone who, even with a basic cell phone or a phone, like, you're able to access information that you normally wouldn't have. So I think there's power in information. You might not have money straight away, but if you have information or are aware of opportunities and things outside of your village or your compound, I think that can do a lot for people. And you find that even for women's rights, right? The fact that someone just from a general mobile phone can gain access to information about her health, about her rights as a human being, has translated to empowerment. And I think for me, that is kind of social development at a grassroots level, having people be more informed about their rights, what they have access to, what they can do, what they can change, where they can get help or support or solution for their problems.
Yeah. Wow, that is so interesting. Even like the most basic of things, I remember again, tying it back to my own story, that, back in the days when you were something as simple as looking for a job.
Yeah.
You would have to buy like a newspaper, and the jobs advertised at the back, and you have to go through and see and go to the public phone in the street to make a call to find out. And if you needed like to send an email or make copies, you have to go a distance to try and find that one internet cafe where they can help you log on, and send your CV or apply for that job, which is, like,
it's a mission. Yeah, that's a mission. Just you talking about it, I'm exhausted just listening to the admin that needs to happen.
And I think what also comes to mind for me right now is like in the mining sector, there's advancements even there, like for the artisan underground, where previously they'd have like paper checklists or whatever it is to do the checks. I mean, they still do the actual work, but now there's technology, there's apps where they can fill in their checklist or complete whatever.
Exactly.
And if there's no connection underground, then they are able to, using that same app when they are back to connectivity, to try and sync that information, and it's stored digitally.
100%.
So in those little things, it is somehow technology, playing a role in impacting the man on the ground, I guess.
And may I add to that? So I was on a project with the International Finance Corporation, IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group, where they were trying to transform the automotive sector, i.e. make it more inclusive by, as you mentioned, the artisans. So, for a car has various components. There are nuts, there are bolts, there's leather that is used for the seats, there's plastic needed for certain. So what the IFC has done in South Africa is that they've created this Loop platform. It's also an app where if you're an artisan, whether you produce leather or these nuts and bolts, you can actually register on the platform and say, okay, these are the nuts and bolts that I produce. These are the sizes, shapes. You can even put it in the picture. And then what that happens is that your big OEMs, i.e. Mercedes, BMW, the big guys, are also able to access that platform and see where they can actually source locally these various components. And that's a technological platform. It's called the Loop Matchmaking Platform, matching the artisans to these big car producers. And that's also a very nice case in point of how technology can play a role in actually being inclusive for people on the ground.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And now I want us to get into the policy aspect of things, right? Because I believe that policies are one of the main things in which we can enforce that inclusive, I guess, innovation. To force people to kind of think inclusively in creating technologies.
Exactly.
Because I know also being in the industry that we can be so, I don't know, just focused on the thing that we are creating and not think of the bigger picture, how it impacts our society, how it impacts, the world that we live in today. So you've been involved in policy advocacy, especially in labor markets and industrial policy. How can African policymakers ensure that technology does not exacerbate existing inequalities, but instead promotes that inclusive growth?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things I definitely want to speak to is that what will be important, even when we think about our education system, whether it's the high schools, the TVET colleges, or the universities, that whatever courses or programs are being, curated and put together, that there needs to be a clear school to industry linkage. Right? So if I'm an engineer and I'm being taught this, I need to kind of have a sense of where these skills would matter, i.e. in what industry, working for which company, working for which organization. I think that's one thing that's extremely important. But I even think with our education system now, and this is something that I promote as a career coach, is that soft skills training is very important. What is soft skills? Soft skills is the ability to adapt in whatever environment. If I'm in a meeting, this is how I know how to show up. If there's a new project at work, this is how I see where I can add value. If there's a new project that requires us to be more technologically savvy, this on my own accord is the course that I will sign up for whilst I'm working to actually equip myself for that. So the way that work is changing as a consequence of technology is that we need to kind of raise a generation of people who are more proactive, that for themselves, they kind of adapt and adjust and tweak and update their skills as is required for the changing work environment. So that's one thing I just wanted to highlight, that even when you think of education policy, that really we need to have clarity about the education to industry linkages of what's happening now. So that even if I have a marketing degree, if maybe now the ICT sector for, is trying to promote this, I know how I can actually put my skills even there to actually add value and bring a contribution. So that's one thing. Then another thing that I think is starting to become more important is that even in the way industries are set up, that we do it in the context of industrial hubs or economic zones or special economic zones, right? So for instance, I always use this example of Hawassa Industrial Park in Ethiopia. So it's basically a textiles and industry industrial park. And basically you have local Ethiopians producing clothing and textiles on behalf of American companies, Chinese companies from the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, doing it locally. And then all the kind of like packaging and processing for export happens in this hub. The research and development also happens in this hub. The technological advancements all happen all in one place, so that even if you're part of just like the, preparing the clothes, the gloves and what have you, but you still see what's happening on the technological front, on the export packaging and processing for export. So I think what will be very important is that as, African countries, we start to think about these are the kind of goods we have competitive advantage at producing or what have you. We start to create industrial hubs around them. And the beauty of industrial hubs is that you could even start to have a TVET college that exists within that hub, where even as we are going to classes and learning, but across Nje, you see the factory doing stuff. So you are consciously being aware of what's happening. And I mean, we have our own various special economic zones across the countries, mainly also for manufacturing and what have you. But as we start to kind of push more ICT related services related production, I think there's a huge rationale for policy to think of the education to industry linkages, but also think of the industrial hub model, that whatever we start to produce more, we actually create industrial hubs around that. And then my final point, particularly as it relates to employment and youth, is that agriculture is not sexy, not deemed as sexy as a sector, but it's the sector that is actually positioned to grow. Because of climate change globally, it's getting harder and trickier to produce food. So going forward, Africa is going to be the food hub. People will be looking at us globally. So we are in a position to be the great exporter of food again. And if we can start to have industrial hubs around agricultural produce, we could be in it. And then what's beautiful is that it includes rural communities and people who live in those areas. So that's just something to watch, just as an added thing that, industrialization in agriculture, high-tech agriculture is going to continue to be relevant in our society today.
Yeah, you've made so many amazing points, and when you speak, my mind works in pictures, so I'm trying to picture all the things that you are talking about, but also just thinking about the education space, which is something I'm really passionate about. Initially, I was also one of those who were just thinking we need to teach robotics and digital skills and computer literacy, which are important skills for today. But the more I've engaged with students and just being in those environments, you then realize that they need more than that. Right? And I've come to a realization that they actually need an ecosystem. So if we look at your private schools or your former Model C schools, what makes them great, in addition to the financial support, obviously, is that there's ecosystems that exist within those schools that support the holistic development of the student. So how do we then collaborate, with the government, your NPOs and NGOs and the private sectors? How do we collectively come together to kind of create those ecosystems to support the holistic student development of students that come from like your townships or your villages, because they need more than just the technology. Like how do you, for example, when they transition from primary into high school, like their adjustment, in most public schools in the township, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
Like your career guidance from the point of this is your personality type and you'd actually do well in these subjects and these careers. So creating, that pipeline for students, which then links later into the marketplace and the opportunities that exist. But also I think to add on that is the thing of we can't continue to look at careers like in the traditional sense.
100%.
As you've mentioned, now in the agriculture space, it's a growing industry, even though like from face value, it's not attractive. But that's where in the future, where the money is.
Exactly. And that's where the investment will come to. That's where the money will actually go to. Right?
So, positioning, I guess, people also, mainly the youth, I guess, to start thinking that we're not just doing these subjects and these are the courses. And what other opportunities exist beyond just the traditional systems that exist. So you moderated a panel at the Women Deliver conference. a session on women, capital, and entrepreneurship.
Yes.
Could you just share your thoughts on how technology can be a game changer for women entrepreneurs in African economies?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the first things I just even want to mention about like that session on capital women entrepreneurship was that one of the things that I had been thinking about is the fact that, you know, we need more kind of like smaller businesses, right? We need an ecosystem where smaller businesses can thrive in the continent, because now most entrepreneurs on the African continent do it for survival. It's like, I can't find a formal job, therefore let me hustle, right? But there's power in actually saying, I'm going to start this and actually make it grow and employ people. But what do you need for growth as an entrepreneur? You need capital, right? And one of the conversations we had during the panel session is like, do women even know where to get these sources of funding, right? And the answer was yes, because of, you know, access to cell phones and the internet, you can find various organizations online and apply for venture capital. But another thing that also then came up was the fact that most women kind of self-select out of even applying for this capital because they're like, oh, it's too risky. What if my business doesn't succeed after they've given me all this money? So one of the things now we were starting to think about was, what are the behavioral patterns or thinking of women when it comes to entrepreneurship and actually pushing to get the venture, you know, capital funding in order to expand and grow? Because now you're finding in the continent, there's a lot of women who actually have fintech, so financial technology businesses. They're interested in the space, but they're too scared to apply for funding to actually grow and expand more. So that was one of the things that came out. In terms of the role of technology for women entrepreneurs, I mean, it's a lot of things, right? Access to information, the ability to access, you know, clients even outside of your own region, right? Because you can use something as simple as, you know, like Facebook or Instagram marketplace, right? To kind of Instagram for business, to kind of access more clientele, right? You're able to create a brand, a brand that reaches the whole globe, right? In terms of even if you're selling wigs or you're selling a handbag, right? Now your market is not just limited to you could be selling, you know, and using various platforms to even like transport your goods to the US or what have you, posted outside of your own country. So technology has really been amazing at that. And what it also helps us is that even if you're not competitive in your own country, i.e. you're not the best producer of that wig or that dress, if you have a market in the US or the UK, you can still thrive, you can still do well. But now let's talk more about your entrepreneurs, such as your women who are selling at the market, you know, who are selling maize, cassava, you know what I mean? What technology has done is that it's given them access to microcredit. So there's something called microcredit where you can actually, if maybe you need something as small as like 50 Rand or 100 Rand just to buy stock or be able to gain transport from your village to the market, you're able to access that and pay it back later. And there's various fintech platforms that offer that. And the interest charge is very low. That's why it's called micro, small. The interest charge is very low. So technology has been very great at then helping even someone who says, okay, I have the goods, but I don't have the money to start and even go to the city, right? They can at least access that small bit of money in order to be able to at least get to point B so that they can actually sell their produce. So I think those are some of the ways, and it's not perfect. We still have a long way to go, but I think technology will be very good for us, you know, as entrepreneurs. And I mean, I include myself there because I consider myself an entrepreneur, but I do want to highlight in that breath that for women in the context of technology and us trying to build our businesses and do things, we just need to be brave in putting ourselves in the rooms and the spaces where, you know, capital is being offered, and we need to be able to confidently say, invest in me because I can do X, Y, Z. We need to stop being shy, overthinking, or just saying, oh, but I'm planning to have kids in the next 5 years, so maybe let me stop now and then, you know, make room for that. wherever you are, just like be brave enough to say whatever opportunity exists for me to learn how to code, to learn how to learn, upskill on a certain technology so I'm better at my business, just go for it. You'll see there. You'll see there. It might seem difficult, but just go for it. You'll see there how it is. But just go. That's
go.
that's
automatic.
Don't self-select. Just go and see. Like just see it when you're in there, type of thing. That's my biggest advice, because the opportunities are many and they will keep going in. But the people who are aware of the opportunities or even get more are the people who put themselves out there. Even when we talk about technology, right, and investment. So we need people actually to say, even if I'm not tech inclined, let me go and try. Let me go to that class and that session and see what they say about the role of technology to make my business better.
There's so many limitations, I guess, mentally for
yes
it's not even as much as like access to those
exactly
funds and whatever,
100%,
but how we view ourselves and the courage to just even to take risks, right? We want to calculate everything.
Will it work out? Is it feasible?
Is it feasible? Whereas sometimes you just need to go for it. And I think also in addition to that, you look at something as simple as when you were talking to the skills aspect, something as simple as events, right? Someone was saying to me, "Oh, I'm happy for you. You are out there." And it's more than just being out there, because firstly, you select the kind of events that you want to attend. But also, if we speak to industry-related events, it gets me thinking about or exposed to what are my peers thinking about. What's the discussion in the room? Like, what are the key topics within the industry? But also just connecting to people that ordinarily in my personal life I wouldn't have access to connecting with those people. So being in those spaces then gives that opportunity to learn about things that you wouldn't necessarily learn in the formal way of education, like taking a course on something, but also connecting with people, even social media. I found you on
through
social media.
Exactly.
So like how you are also using all of these tools to enable you personally.
So important.
And what are some of the local and global trends you've observed in how governments and private sectors ensure fair competition and economic advancements, I guess?
Sure. Competition is a very interesting one. So on the topic of tech, I remember when I was there was a case we're looking at about competition on digital markets. So for instance, if you go on Google now and do a Google search for green table, right? Maybe you want to buy a green table. This is very random. Green table, right? Usually the stores that would come up first, right, would be maybe your more popular stores that you already know they furniture sellers and what have you. But you also might have carpenters, right, who also produce green tables, but they'll be at the bottom of the search page or on page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of Google, right? And there's a competition question there. Is it competitive that if I go online and do a quick search for a product, I only see the bigger players first? So you found now that, like, for instance, the what do you call our competition commission, right? Investigating such matters, and even globally, your Department of Justice in the US is starting to, even for entrepreneurs and players on online platforms, they deserve a chance to actually play more. And even this competitive, conversation then also goes to IP and all these things in terms of making sure that even if you're an entrepreneur that is on online platforms, you need to be able to be seen, because that's the first part on a market, right? It's the visibility even before you can say this is my price. And it's so important even on online platforms to have the kind of regulation by governments that to say online, we also want to promote competition so that all players on the online marketplace have a stake. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And then on the other hand, in terms of generally what I'm starting to see globally, on the African continent to begin with, particularly as pertains to promoting youth employment or job creation, is more investment in the creative economy. So the creative economy refers to your arts, your music festivals, cultural events, tourism, food tourism as well, right? There's a whole market there. So you're starting to see an even cooperation between governments and private sector to say, how do we invest more in the creative economy? Because it's usually younger people who are involved in the space. I mean, if you think of like theater, right? Think of like what you consume when you travel. If you go to Ghana now, where do you want to go? What do you want to see? There's the museums, yes, but there's a music festival that you want to go to. And it's usually youth that are involved. And the powerful thing with such festivals is that you're not employing the artists, you're also employing the caterers, the security, the admin people for tickets, the people who are going to clean afterwards, the promoters, the ushers, so it actually translates to more, there's knock-on employment effects as a consequence of the creative economy. Even on a movie set, it's not just the actors, right? It's even like where the actors go and rest, right? Someone has to serve them food, make sure they have their water, right? You know what I mean? There's the producers, directors, there's the assistants. It translates to so much more employment, right? And technology is a huge part of it there as well. So you're starting to see more interest and investment in the creative economy, because there's going to be a lot of money there. And also the creative economy is an export goods. Countries like Hong Kong, Saudi Arabia crave African talent, African spirit. And now that we're investing more in packaging it, marketing it, right? In a manner that's appealing to those markets, there's actually more room for growth. So in terms of like driving economic growth and what have you, what I can say at the take-home points is that you're just seeing more cooperation between private sector and the government to create these ecosystems and opportunities to drive the kind of sectors that would absorb more of our labor force. Yeah.
There's so many elements. It's layered.
It's very layered. It's very, very layered. Yeah.
Wow, I absolutely love that. And as someone with both, because you're an academic as well as like obviously the other practical stuff. Do you think there are key areas where more research is needed just to understand societal impacts of technology? Across the African continent,
absolutely.
I guess.
Yeah. So it's interesting because now I'm at a stage where I was like, I am very academic, and I was thinking, do I want to do a PhD? What would I study? What would I what would I focus on and what have you? And I think one of my biggest take-home points now is that because of how society is now, whatever you decide to do as a researcher or as a knowledge expert has to be multidisciplinary. You can't just say, I'm doing technology. It needs to be at the intersection of maybe technology and the environment. Do you understand? There needs to be that intersectionality, right? So that you're able to add value with the expertise that you have. You must have like both a why to the research and a how. And that's why I spoke to the power of having kind of industrial hubs when you think of production, so that even the R&D and research and development that's happening in that space is not just saying, we're trying to produce more cars. We need to produce more cars and make sure that we're not emitting, we minimize our CO2 emissions because the environment is, what have you. Now we even want to think what kind of technologies we want in those cars. We even need to think about the various country contexts where these cars are going to be. So it's a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder type of thing. And I even say this to my friends who are academics doing their PhDs. I say, you need to be able, whatever research you're doing, to be able to communicate it to private sector entities, to investors in a way that makes sense for them. It needs to be relevant. You can't just say, I ran a regression and then I saw this. You need to be able, these results mean this for your business. These results mean this for the sustainability of your exports to these markets. These results mean this for exports in the context of BRICS and also the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. as well as your partnerships with the EU. So I think when we talk about research today, it has to be multidisciplinary. You can't just say, I'm a tech expert. Tell me more.
And then what?
Tell me more.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
I feel like I needed to have a notebook. But I'm glad all of this is recorded, and we can always go back and listen. And just looking forward now, what are your hopes for how technology can be leveraged to create more equitable and sustainable economies? And what steps do you think are needed to make this a reality? I think the question you've just answered, you touched a bit on that.
Sure, yeah. I think the first thing is that I wish that Africans would not fear technology, that they would be curious about it, that they would even learn to code, try that free coding course online that's offered by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Google it. Just try to open up your possibility set. I think our mindset with technology that it should be a tool to make us as human beings more excellent in the work that we're doing. There are so many problems that need to be solved in the world. So many people are suffering. So I think we need to change our mindset to be one where we say we will leverage technology in order to make the world a better place. That's something that I really want to add. And then I also just want to say that technology will become increasingly more complicated and sophisticated, but no one can ever replace a human being. The way we are built emotionally, mentally, how we engage with other people, our diplomacy of efforts, even from a point of forming relationships with partners in other countries. No ambassador or president would want to speak to a robot and make a deal with a robot for what kind of economic relations that a human being needs to do that. Fine, they can get more intel, maybe do some research. You ask the robot, tell me more about this president. What can we do? How can we, communicate in a way that will be valuable given their country, political and historical context? But no one, no robot, no tool can ever replace the essence of a human being and their purpose here on earth to do the work that they're called to do and to do it well. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. When I was preparing for this, I was just thinking that, you are such a layered person, and there was just no way we could capture all the aspects that Sibahle, speaks to in one episode. But I really enjoyed our discussion today. And just in closing, I just wanted, you're going to the One Young World Summit. And when I was looking it up on the internet, I was like, this lady has been an ambassador for One Young World 10 years ago already. How did you get involved in that?
No, so I'm actually not going to this one.
Oh, okay.
So I went to the one in 2014, and One Young World is basically a leadership forum where leaders from across the globe come together, share their experiences, share their ideas, and basically learn the tools to expand whatever change-making work they're doing, right? So some people, people were doing various things, humanitarians. I'm, an economist doing the work that I do. So when you finish that, week away, I was in Dublin, Ireland in my year in 2014. You come back to your home country and then you kind of figure out what you're going to do, but you remain part of the One Young World network. So we still have get-togethers here in Johannesburg, the SADC region, West Africa, they have their get-togethers. So we continue to engage, share ideas, collaborate and work together. So even 2 weeks back when I was a keynote speaker at the One Young World, it was a combination of my reflections since having been 10 years ago, but also then sharing economic insights for the outgoing or the new ambassadors to have in mind as they think about their engagement at the coming now One Young World Summit in Canada, and what they think their change-making work will look like going forward as a consequence of their experience and learnings.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
And then briefly around your coaching business, how did you get to that? You are an economist, and now you've been a career and mindset coach.
Yes.
And the kind of coaching you do also according to what I've seen and heard, is you dive deep into the inner person.
Sure.
To know the reason why.
Yes.
We do things the way we do. We show up the way. How did you get to that?
Sure. So I'm a development economist, right? But my passion is labor economics. So I care a lot about looking at the labor market. So where is the demand for jobs coming from? What is the supply of workers, of labor looking like to fill in those job roles? So as a consequence of my work, I have a sense of how various companies look at the recruitment process and, what kind of skills are required. So I have a nice picture of like what the nature of work and potentially the future of work would look like. So that was the first thing I had to think about in terms of the coaching, and having myself, after I came back from the UK, finished the masters at UCT, was job searching for a while. And I was job searching for a while because I was struggling to find a job that aligned both with my skills, my interests, and also my future goals. So I learned a lot during that phase. So the coaching is almost then a combination of that, given the fact that I understand how labor markets work, regardless of what sector, what you studied. I have a sense of, what various people are looking for and how they should position themselves for corporates. But at the same time, I care about people doing work that they believe they're called to do and not doing what they think is popular because, my friends also studied accounting, did this, therefore I must do this. Yeah. So the inner work aspect of it is I really spend time getting to work through the client and say, given your background, how you were raised, what you saw happening in society, and the kind of mark that you want to make in the world, what are the kind of steps that you individually should take in your career journey in order to achieve the career goals or legacy that you set out to do? Because now what people do is that they just go for what job is available. They stuck there they're miserable for 2 years. Then they stay because they're like, but I'll get a promotion and more money. So if maybe their plan for their career journey looked like this, they will end up just going like this as per where the organization they've decided to stick with goes. Then there's this gap or mismatch, which makes them highly depressed and miserable because they know that they're not in their true north or not following their true purpose. So my coaching kind of helps free people and help them make more conscious and intentional choices about what opportunities in their career journey they decide then to pursue. Yeah.
I need to sign up.
You are welcome.
Thank you so much for taking time to come and speak to us today.
Absolutely.
This discussion was very insightful for me, and I hope it will be the same for whoever will be watching and listening to this. And so how do people get in touch with you? How can people reach out in terms of if they want coaching or just to follow your journey?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've become more active on my social media. So on Instagram, it's at Mindset Coach Siba. That's where I do updates and give tips on just the career journey, but you can feel free to contact me as well. You can also send me an email at abismagadla@gmail.com to book a 15-minute complimentary, i.e. free coaching session where we can kind of introduce ourselves to each other and I can propose how I could potentially support you on your journey.
Oh, okay. That's amazing. That brings us to the end of our discussion today.
Thank you. This was wonderful. And I hope the audience finds it insightful because I think the power of these sessions is for people to feel empowered to navigate their lives a bit better, a bit differently.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you so much for agreeing to this and coming to talk to me.
Thank you.